The lake is calm tonight. Too calm, if you have spent any real time on water. No ripple worth the name. No smell of weed or fish. Just a flat, dark surface holding the last of the light, and beneath it, something the eye cannot reach. I have stood on the shores of a great many lakes. Most of them tell you what they are within a minute. This one does not. The Congo has a habit of that. It shows you a surface and keeps its meaning underneath. For a long time, the outside world treated this part of Africa as a blank space, a green smear on the map, to be crossed or exploited, and rarely understood. We assumed the mystery was only our own ignorance, and that it would clear the moment we looked properly. Some of it did, some of it has only deepened the closer we have looked. What follows are 7 of those cases. 7 things about the Congo that people like to call its darkest secrets. Some are genuine puzzles that science has not yet solved. 1 or 2, science has answered, though the answers turn out to be stranger than the questions. And 1, I have to tell you plainly, is a story the forest refuses to give up, whether or not it is true. I will try, in each case, to keep what we know separate from what we only suspect. That line matters here more than almost anywhere. Let me begin with the lake. The water I described sits on the eastern edge of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, along the border with Rwanda. Its name is Kivu. Around its shores live close to 2 million people, in one of the more crowded corners of the continent. Seen from above, it is beautiful. Steep green hills, quiet bays, fishing boats slipping out at dawn. The trouble is not on the surface, it is far below it. Kivu is deep. In places the water goes down almost half a kilometer, and unlike most lakes, its layers do not mix. The cold, heavy water at the bottom stays at the bottom, year after year, undisturbed. That stillness is the whole problem. Because down in those depths, the water is not pure. It is charged with enormous quantities of dissolved gas, carbon dioxide, and something rarer for a lake to hold, methane. Take a moment with what that means. Trapped in the deep water of this one lake is a volume of gas that is difficult to picture. Enough carbon dioxide to smother and enough methane to burn. It stays down there for the same reason a sealed bottle of soda stays quiet. Pressure. The weight of all the water above holds the gas dissolved. And still, we know this can go wrong, because we have watched a smaller version of it happen. Years ago, at 2 lakes far to the north, in Cameroon, the deep gas escaped. At one of them, a lake called Nios, a cloud of carbon dioxide burst up from the depths in a single night. It was heavier than the air around it. The cloud rolled down the valleys in the dark, silent and invisible, and settled over the villages while people slept. Close to 1,700 people died, and their livestock with them, without ever waking. That kind of event has a name now, a limnic eruption, a lake, quite literally, breathing out. There is a further detail that makes Kivu unusual, even among dangerous lakes. Its gas is not simply left over from the distant past. The lake is being charged, slowly, from below. Volcanic carbon dioxide seeps up into the deep water from the restless geology beneath, and microbes living in the darkness add methane of their own. The store is not fixed. It is, very gradually, being topped up. And the lake does not sit in a peaceful place. On its northern shore stand some of the most active volcanoes in Africa. One of them, near Congo, holds a lake of molten lava in its summit. In 2021 it erupted, sending rivers of lava toward the city of Goma, on Kivu's very edge. Afterwards, people asked an obvious and frightening question. Could the volcano disturb the lake? On that occasion, the monitoring said no. The eruption neither reached nor unsettled the deep water. But the question itself is the point. Here, 2 rare hazards sit side by side, a gas-charged lake and a living volcano. And the way they might one day act on each other is exactly the sort of thing we cannot yet model with confidence. Kivu holds far more gas than Nios ever did, and vastly more people live along its shores. That is why some scientists have watched it for years with real unease. Here, though, the story turns, and honesty means following it where it goes. More recent monitoring has been, on balance, reassuring. Careful measurements suggest the gas in Kivu is close to a steady state, rather than building without limit toward release. The lake is now studied more closely than almost any other of its kind. There is even a project drawing the methane up on purpose, to burn it for electricity, which lowers the hazard and powers the region at the same time. So the picture is genuinely mixed, and I will not tidy it up for effect. The danger is real, and its scale is frightening. Yet the current evidence, in the same breath, does not point to an eruption anytime soon. What stays unresolved is the long game, what a large nearby earthquake might do. What the volcanoes close by might do, how things might shift over centuries. Those questions do not yet have confident answers. Kivu, then, is not a lake that is about to kill. It is a lake that could, under the wrong conditions, and that we do not yet fully understand. That is a stranger thing to live beside than a simple threat. It is an uncertainty, and uncertainty is harder to sleep next to. The lake keeps its danger by holding still. What comes next does the opposite. It never stops moving. Follow the water west, across the width of the continent, and you come to the Congo River itself. The second longest in Africa, and by some measures the most powerful on Earth after the Amazon. Most great rivers, near the sea, grow wide and slow and shallow. They spread out, tired, before the end. This one does not. In its lower reaches, it narrows instead, and something strange takes hold of it. The riverbed drops away beneath the surface. In places, the water is more than 200 meters deep. That makes the lower Congo the deepest river known anywhere in the world. Not a lake, a river. Down there, in the dark, the water is anything but calm. It is violent beyond anything you could guess from the bank. Underwater canyons, whirlpools, and currents strong enough to seize a thing and hold it under. The evidence for this arrived, oddly, in the form of dead fish. Researchers working the river noticed fish drifting up to the surface, already dying, their bodies harmed in a very particular way. The pattern matched something seen in human divers brought up too quickly from great depth. The bends, injuries caused by moving from high pressure to low far too fast. Those fish had been living deep. The river's own turbulence had torn them upward in seconds. That was the first sign of how extreme the lower Congo really is. The second was stranger, and it is still down there now. Among these rapids, the fish are not the same from one side of the river to the other. The water is so deep, so wild, so broken by canyons, that populations only a short way apart almost never meet. Rather than join them, the river keeps them apart. Held like that, generation after generation, they have drifted into separate kinds. Different species, evolving side by side, walled off not by mountains or by distance, but by moving water. One of them is a small, pale fish that lives so deep, in such unbroken darkness, that it has simply let go of the surface world. Its eyes have shrunk to almost nothing. Its body has lost nearly all its color, faded to a ghostly pink. When researchers read its genes, they found the instructions for building eyes and color quietly switched off, unused, slowly decaying inside the code. Here is a fish that lives in a river, and yet lives like a creature of the deep ocean, or a lightless cave. This one stretch of river has become a natural laboratory for how new life appears. The lower Congo holds an extraordinary variety of fish, many of them living in this river and nowhere else on Earth, packed into a short and turbulent run of water. Those same forces that tear these fish apart also, given enough time, multiply them. That barrier works on more than fish. Those same rapids, dropping the river steeply toward the sea, have always cut the deep interior off from the ocean. No ship can sail up from the Atlantic into the heart of the continent, because this final staircase of falling water stands in the way. What still holds real uncertainty is the pace of it all. How quickly the river split these species apart. How its churning walls of water keep them separated, day to day. New forms are still being found down there, and much of that deep channel has never once been seen directly. We are, in a sense, still standing at the edge of it, looking at a surface and guessing at the lives underneath. The river hides its violence beneath the water. Its next secret turns the pattern over again and writes itself across the sky. And still we cannot fully account for it. Spend a rainy season in the Congo basin, and you will not forget the storms. They gather most afternoons, build through the evening, and break with a force that people raised elsewhere find hard to credit. The thunder does not roll once and fade. It stacks, one strike upon another, until the night has no silence left in it. This is not just an impression. It has been measured, and it stands as a record. When satellites began counting lightning across the entire planet, the Congo basin stood out at once. Not a single hotspot, but hundreds of them, gathered here more densely than anywhere else on Earth. Map the most lightning-struck places in the world, and a remarkable number of them fall inside this one basin. For years, a small settlement in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, called Kifuka, held the world record. The most lightning strikes per square kilometer, per year, measured anywhere on the globe. Newer data has since handed that single record to a lake in South America. But the Congo Basin as a whole is still the most electrically violent region on the planet. Storm for storm, night after night, nowhere else is struck as relentlessly. The question that remains unanswered is a simple one to ask and a hard one to settle. Why here? There are good partial answers. The basin sits on the equator, soaked in warmth and moisture, which is the fuel that storms feed on. Its forests breathe an enormous volume of water into the air each day. Winds and terrain lift it in ways that build towering clouds. But the exact recipe, the precise reason this particular basin outdoes every other warm, wet corner of the earth, is still being worked out. Dust and smoke in the air may play a part. So may the shape of the land and the daily rhythm of the forest itself. There is more to these storms than spectacle. Lightning does something chemical to the air. Each bolt burns hot enough to force the nitrogen and oxygen in the sky to combine, making compounds that fall with the rain and feed the soil. A basin struck this often is, in a small but genuine way, fertilized by its own storms. The lightning that batters the forest may also, quietly, help to feed it. For the people living beneath it, though, the danger is not abstract at all. Where the sky strikes this relentlessly, lightning becomes a real and regular cause of death, and a hazard hard to guard against in villages without tall, protected buildings. The same storms that enrich the ground also take lives, most years, largely uncounted by the wider world. It is a curious position to be in. We can measure the lightning here to a fine degree. We can watch it from space. And we still cannot say with full confidence exactly why the Congo, of all places, is the one the sky punishes most. So far, these secrets have been things you could see, or at least feel. Water and weather. The next one lay hidden underfoot, and we did not even know it was there until a few years ago. In the heart of the Congo Basin, straddling the two countries that share the river's name, there is a stretch of swamp forest so remote and so hard to enter that for a long time almost no scientist had set foot in it. From the air, it looks like more of the same forest. Green, flat, and seemingly endless. Beneath that forest, though, the ground is not ordinary soil. It is peat, waterlogged, half-rotted plant matter, built up over thousands of years, in a layer that in places runs several meters deep. Peat forms only where the ground stays so wet that dead plants cannot fully rot. Instead of breaking down and giving up their carbon, they pile up and hold on to it. For years, nobody knew how much of it was down there. The region was too difficult to reach, too dangerous, too poorly mapped. Then, only recently, a team finally crossed it on foot and by boat, sampling the ground as they went, and joined what they found to measurements from satellites. What they announced surprised even them. This single swamp is the largest tropical peatland in the world. It covers an area larger than England. And locked inside it, they estimated, is something close to 30 billion tons of carbon. Let me try to give that a shape. It is a store of carbon comparable to many years of the entire world's output from burning fossil fuels, held quietly in the mud of one African swamp that we finished mapping only a short time ago. This is where the secret turns from wonder toward worry. Peat keeps its carbon only for as long as it stays wet. Let it dry out, through a shifting climate or through draining by human hands, and the ancient plant matter begins to rot at last and releases its carbon into the air. What is genuinely uncertain is how stable this vast store really is. There are already hints, in the deepest layers, that the swamp has partly dried out before, in the distant past. Whether a warming climate will tip it from a store into a source, and how quickly, is one of the larger open questions in the whole science of climate. It does not yet have a settled answer. There is a longer story held in that ground too. The peat began to form thousands of years ago, as the last ice age loosened its grip, and it has been building ever since, leaf by fallen leaf. To drill down into it is to read backwards through the region's climate, one wet century at a time. And this is not lifeless ground. Above the peat grows a living swamp forest, home to lowland gorillas and forest elephants, and a great deal besides. That matters for a plain reason. You cannot protect the buried carbon without protecting the forest that keeps it wet. The invisible thing underground and the visible life on top of it turn out to be the same thing to defend. An entire hidden continent of carbon, found almost by accident and balanced on nothing more than the presence of water. That is not a comfortable thing to have only just noticed. Peat, at least, is a substance you could hold in your hand. The next one is alive, and for half a century it has managed to stay hidden in a way no peatland ever could. In 1976, in the north of what was then Zaire, and is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, people in a small mission village began to fall ill with a fever that behaved like nothing anyone knew. It moved through families, and through the little local hospital. The fever killed with terrible speed, and a very high share of those who caught it did not survive. When scientists identified the new virus behind it, they needed a name for it. They chose, deliberately, not to name it after the village, to spare that place the association. Instead, they took the name of a nearby river, the Ebola. Since then, this virus and its close relatives have returned many times, in the Congo and beyond it. We have learned to recognize it, to contain it, and in recent years even to vaccinate against it. In medical terms, we now understand a great deal about what it does to the body. Yet there is a question at the very root of it that remains, even today, not fully answered. Where does the virus live when it is not inside a person? Something like this does not simply vanish between outbreaks. It has to survive somewhere, in some animal that carries it without dying, a natural home from which it spills over into people now and then. Find that hidden reservoir, and you understand where the danger truly begins. The strong suspicion, backed by a good deal of evidence, points to bats. Certain fruit bats carry the marks of past infection. They fit the pattern. They are the leading suspects. And yet, in all honesty, the exact virus responsible for the deadliest Congo outbreaks has never been fully recovered. Alive, from a wild bat caught in the forest. The reservoir is strongly indicated. It is not, strictly speaking, confirmed. There is a further, somber part of the pattern. We are not the only ones this virus reaches. In these same forests, wild gorillas and chimpanzees have died of it too, at times in very large numbers. Our closest living relatives are as vulnerable to it as we are. That grim fact carries one useful edge. A wave of ape deaths deep in the forest can act as an early warning, a sign the virus is stirring nearby before it ever reaches a single person. The forest sometimes signals the danger in advance, if we are watching closely enough to read it. So we are left in an unusual place. We named this thing half a century ago. We have watched it, fought it, and read its genes letter by letter. And we still cannot point, with complete certainty, to the animal in the forest where it waits between visits. The secret here is not the disease itself, it is the address. Each of these secrets, so far, has been real. Measured, sampled, sequenced, even where it is not fully explained. The next one is different, and I want to handle it with care, because it forces us to be honest about the difference between a mystery and a story. Deep in the swamp forests of the northern Congo, in a country of flooded woodland and slow black rivers, there is a lake called Tele. It is remote and hard to reach, and the people who live in the surrounding forest have long told a particular story. They speak of a large animal in the deep water, something with a heavy body, a long neck, and a long tail. In one version of the telling, it carries the name Mokelimbembeb. When that description first reached the outside world, it caused a stir, because to Western ears it sounded like one thing above all, a living dinosaur, a creature out of 100 million years ago, somehow still breathing in an African swamp. Across the last century, a run of expeditions went looking. Some were serious efforts. Some were not. They came back with stories, and footprints of doubtful origin, and blurred glimpses, and the occasional sound carried across the water at night. What none of them came back with was evidence. No bone, no clear photograph, no specimen. Nothing that would pass the ordinary tests we apply to any claim that a large animal is real. Now, here I have to be plain, because it would be easy and dishonest to leave the mystery dangling for effect. There is no scientific evidence that a large unknown reptile lives in Lake Tele. An animal of the size described could not, by everything we understand, stay hidden and breeding in a single swamp for millions of years without leaving a trace behind. The scientific answer, as matters stand, is that Mokelimbembe is a story and not an established animal. But I want to treat that story with respect rather than scorn, because the two are not the same. A local account is a real observation of something. It may well be a known animal, seen briefly and remembered larger than life. In these very waters there are forest elephants that swim with only a raised trunk showing, and very large soft-shelled turtles and crocodiles. Any of them, caught in poor light by someone with good reason to be wary, could plant the seed of a story that grows with every retelling. The honest scientific position is not the same as certainty. It does not say that such a thing is flatly impossible in principle. It says that there is no good evidence for it, and a great deal that argues against it, and that belief ought to follow the evidence rather than race ahead of it. And it is worth remembering that science does not dismiss these things lightly, because just occasionally, the impossible survivor turns out to be real. Off the coast of Africa, in 1938, fishermen hauled up a strange, heavy, lobe-finned fish. Experts recognized it, with astonishment, as a coelacanth, a kind of fish thought to have died out alongside the dinosaurs. It had not died out at all. Somehow it had been living in the deep sea the whole time. So the idea that an ancient line might quietly persist is not, in itself, absurd. It has genuinely happened. The whole difference lies in the evidence. That coelacanth arrived on a boat deck, solid and undeniable. Mokele-mbembe has never arrived at all, which raises a fair and slightly uncomfortable question. If the Congo could hide the true depth of its own river from us until recently, and a continent of carbon until only a few years ago, how certain can we really be about what it does and does not contain? It is a good question, and it deserves a real answer, which the last of these 7 secrets happens to give us. For most of the 19th century, European science was confident that it had catalogued the large animals of Africa, the big cats, the great apes, the elephants, and the antelope. That list, it was assumed, was more or less finished. In the forests of the eastern Congo, though, explorers kept hearing of an animal they could not match to anything on that list. Local people described a creature something like a horse or a mule, striped in places like a zebra, that moved through the deep forest and was almost never seen. To the outside experts, it sounded like a traveler's tale, a muddle perhaps of animals already known. For years it was waved away. Then, right at the turn of the 20th century, a British administrator managed to obtain first some pieces of striped skin, and then, crucially, a skull. The skull settled the matter. This was no confusion of familiar animals. It was something genuinely new to science, a large mammal that had gone completely unrecorded. We call it the okapi. It turned out to be, of all things, a relative of the giraffe, a shorter forest-dwelling cousin, with a coat like dark velvet and boldly striped legs, and a long dark tongue. It had been living in the Congo forests the entire time, known perfectly well to the people there, and missed entirely by the science that believed its catalogue complete. Even now, more than a century on, the okapi is still one of the harder large animals to observe in the wild. It is shy and solitary, and beautifully hidden by the very forest it belongs to. For a long time, the best record we had of its habits came not from watching it directly, but from cameras it tripped by accident in the dark. And the okapi is not the last word. This forest has kept surprising us. As recently as a little over a decade ago, scientists confirmed an entirely new species of monkey in the central Congo, an animal with a striking, almost human face, long known to local hunters but new to science. Familiar for generations to the people of the forest. Brand new, once again, to the rest of us. The pattern keeps repeating. This is not a finished map with a few blank corners left to fill. It is a place still handing us living animals we did not know were there. I keep the okapi in mind whenever I think about the others on this list. It marks the honest ground between 2 opposite mistakes. On one side lies the error of the old experts, who assumed that because they had not seen a thing, it could not be out there. The forest proved them wrong, with a giant. On the other side lies the error of wanting a thing so badly, a surviving dinosaur, say, that stories harden into proof in the mind long before any evidence arrives. The okapi asks us to hold both truths at once. This forest genuinely can conceal something large and real from us for a very long time. And the only way to tell the real from the imagined is patient evidence, gathered from a place that surrenders its secrets slowly. That, in the end, is what these 7 share. A lake that could exhale and might not. A river deep enough to make new life in the dark. A sky that strikes harder here than anywhere, for reasons we cannot fully name. A hidden ocean of carbon underfoot. A killer whose home address we still do not know. A story we cannot prove. And a giant we very nearly walked straight past. The Congo has not finished with us. We have charted its rivers, and counted its lightning, and sampled its mud, and still, so much of it sits below the surface, keeping its meaning underneath. The lake in front of me is calm again, flat and dark and quiet. I have learned over the years not to mistake that quiet for emptiness. More often it means only that we have not yet found the way to look.